Hello, it's Noir Nerd, and today I'm going to be talking about a recent game jam I did for a jam on itch.io called the Liminal Jam. So this is quite an intro. I've been doing a bit more game jams, you may have noticed. I've not been posting many vlogs about doing more game jams, but I'm trying to get back into game dev again. Make a few more games, and so in the past month I've worked on three. One as a team, two solo ones. I worked on a Station Beyond, which you can play on itch.io as part of the Caller Jam, and that's what sort of got me back into the whole swing of wanting to do a bit of indie game dev again and start playing around with game dev, make some simple games. So yeah, like I said, I made three: a Station Beyond, dungeon crawler game, sci-fi Lovecraftian influence game, and I contributed to that mostly as mostly doing writing, bit of contributing to the developing the dialogue systems, mostly some texture work as well. And then I created a quick jam game called Neo Gothica, which actually came second place in the Gothic Horror Jam out of about 18 entries, so I did pretty well on that. It's probably the best I've ever done on a game jam, so that was a nice win. And Neo Gothic is it's a bit like a quick adventure game where you can make decisions. Those decisions have outcomes. So it's basically a sort of a mixture of an interactive fiction game, but in a 3D environment, like an adventure game, basically in a typical fantasy Gothic environment. The whole point of that was that you had to defeat this necromancer, but the story could go in several directions depending on what dialogue options you chose. So I used the Unity and Adventure Game Creator for that. And then most recently I just created After Hours Art Critic. More of a unique or strange concept, I suppose. So that's basically you are you play a art critic, a wannabe art critic or an aspiring art critic. You're in a art gallery you've been snuck into by your friend, and you've taken some of this substance D, which is basically something like a psychedelic drug, and then you've basically passed out. So you wake up after hours in the gallery, and then it's basically you have to perform some basic environmental puzzles. There's 3 levels, and the idea of it is that it's liminal space. It's all based around liminal spaces. So I'll just do a vlog now talking about just the process of making that. So I used GDevelop for creating this liminal game jam, and I used 3D. Now GDevelop's only just really supported 3D, so this came with a few issues. There still are some occasional collision box issues, boundary box issues, which are a bit annoying and fiddly. General ease of use with using GDevelop was it's a bit 50-50 really. I mean, for just basically making basic, block-based 3D model environments with boxes and some 3D models, it's actually fairly easy. It's nothing too difficult, but the actual editor itself doesn't really lend itself to 3D properly yet. It was my experience, because you've only got basically a top-down view unless I miss something. So I was having to I mean, it's okay because you can basically, if you can figure out, from just looking at the X, Y, and Z positions where something needs to be, you can usually figure it out and roughly, and then test it out in the preview box, which is quite easy to use. But it definitely would have been useful to have like you have in Unity or Unreal, a truly 3D environment that you can orbit around with a camera, because it's like you basically got the top-down flat view of the environment. So there are certain limitations for sure. I was able to work around some things with so in GDevelop you basically have it's like an event list. So it's like visual programming, but it's event based. So it's sort of almost like Scratch or something like that, where you have predefined behaviors. So this is both a good and a bad thing, obviously. So because this game jam goes on for 20 days, I've managed to complete it in 10. And part of the reason I was able to do it fairly rapidly is because there's not really a hardcore programming element really. It's not like I had to, do bespoke pathfinding, do much programming at all really. I mean, there is a certain type. There's a it's like I said, it's like an event-driven visual scripting thing really. So you got like an events page, and then most of the time it's just a case of like attaching behaviors to specific entities or objects that you put into the game, and then just figuring out the best way to implement those in a linear fashion. And then you have like conditions for when things, like if, I don't know, say for example, if the camera is in collision with one of the paintings, which then in the game generates a phone box dialogue, then with text dialogue. I just have to figure that out. So yeah, I want to just talk for a bit further about some of the game design elements. So I decided to have this. It's a weird mix, this game, basically, of like a looking for hidden objects game. So that's to do with like looking for the artworks, and then you get points basically for the more artworks you examine. It's got a dialogue. Some of it's dialogue based as well. So the idea is that you get communications through your phone, and then you also keep a journal entry, which has got like humorous little quips that the main player, which I think is quite an interesting feature to implement. The idea of like that being you're sort of isolated, but your mobile phone's still working, so it ties in with like ideas around technology as well, and how we interact with people in the modern world. It's a bit satirical sort of game. There's not really much action. There's no like gun bits or anything, but there are some scenes where you have to like use your brain a bit. There's the draggable objects, which is implemented, but they're still a bit. Basically, I've implemented the draggable behavior in GDevelop to the boxes that you can drag around to solve these puzzles. Because water is a element that is, you basically get electrocuted if you go into water, because there's this whole idea in it that there's been a big flood, and that if you touch the water you get electrocuted and die. So it's one of the main environmental challenges in the game, is figuring out just how to cross these areas basically. Obviously, in terms of implementing the liminal space, so liminal space is like a space that has like a nostalgic but uncanny feeling. So it might create feelings of nostalgia but also creepiness. It's quite a hard concept to describe, but I've gone for this like a sort of lo-fi retro, almost like 8-bit-y style, strange environment building, I guess. And then I've tried to incorporate if the artworks, I've just put in some of my own digital art, and then crafted the dialogues around that. I'm fairly happy with how the development went. It was pretty. I do need to add a few little more features I might do, but for now I'm going to leave it. In terms of my other Game Jam games, Neo Gothic, I think I might revisit that and do a patch, and I might also develop it into something a bit more, do a proper version of it, maybe something that's even a 2 or 3 hour game, which would then turn it into a many months project. But I think it might be worth doing that, because it came second place in that jam. It did get a lot of good feedback. That's been the big success really of this getting back into the game jamming. It's like Neo Gothic did really well, which I was quite surprised at. I felt okay about it. I thought I'd done, especially for having 5 or 6 days to do the game, I thought, wow, I've done a good effort there. But I was actually quite surprised that people seem to love it so much, because I thought it was, you could probably play the whole thing in 10 minutes. I did nail the atmosphere, I think. Some people said that, and I think, yeah, probably did. More or less. I could have done better in many other places. The animation's a bit off with the spiders, but yeah, in general, I think the wood and the idea of the torch was a good mechanic to implement. So yeah, I think I might try and build that into something a bit more. Anyway, this has been I don't want to leave it here. It's 10 minutes. I don't want to go on for too long. It's been a little bit of an update on what I've been up to. I don't really do tutorials on here again, though I might do a few on GDevelop. Just
would be
like, for example, I think one that
on
might
how
be
I got
useful. Though it needs a bit of tweaking still, even in itself. But how I got the in 3D, there's a part I worked on where an NPC follows the player. So I could do a tutorial on that. So I might do just a few things like that. Just like based on what I've done, then apply that knowledge in this game jams, then apply those what I've learned and do some tutorials based on it. Obviously, I could go into doing some Free.js tutorials or A-frame stuff, but yeah. What do you think? If you're a viewer of the channel, where would you like? What sort of tutorials would you like to see? I might do a few more again. I did do one recently on JavaScript arrays and that, which was more of a just an explainer video, I suppose. Anyway, that's that. Have a good one. It's my new camera as well, so it should be better quality now in general. Have a good one.